Category 5 Hurricane Milton, which just broke the 900 millibar mark, putting it in rarefied territory. We have all the details, and we're going to try to figure this all out tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast. And we're here. Sorry for the couple of minutes delay there. Just a couple of technical glitches I had to take care of. So, here we are. There's a couple of things that I want to bring up right off the bat, Joe, with regards to Milton.
Well, first of all, you called it. You said last night, and I was a little bit leery about it, but you said that you wouldn't be surprised that this would have hit Category 5. And I woke up this morning, Joe, and when I heard it was already at Category 4, I said, holy mackerel, Joe may be right. And by midday, of course, it hit 5. This is the fastest, or one of the fastest increases in intensity of any hurricane. I think they mentioned Wilma, for example, on the
Right.
modern.
Wilma and Felix. Those are the two,
Yeah,
the fastest. So this one may have been even a bit faster. I mean, when you think about it, the pressure drop. I mean, yesterday more when they made it a tropical storm. What was it, midday yesterday? The pressure was like 995 ish. Okay, I mean it dropped 75 millibars in 24 hours. That's
incredible.
and at one point during this afternoon, the pressure fell almost 20 millibars in 2 hours. I mean, it was just mind blowing. You know, you and I go back a long time. We've seen we've seen Category 5 storms along the way, and I mean, it does help now that they have reconnaissance aircraft monitoring these. They have two planes in there, and it's almost always being monitored. Or in the course of its lifetime, the break periods are very brief. So a lot years ago, you'd have to wait 6 hours and just basically guess off the satellite. But I was just astounded by how quickly. But it should be noted, because this is not getting. This I haven't heard anybody say this. Um, this hurricane is incredibly small. Gales only go out 70 miles, and hurricane force winds only go out 20 miles from the center. So, from the standpoint of geographic coverage, you look at it on the satellite loop, which I'm going to bring up now. I got two different loops. We can start with the visible loop. You look at it and you think, "Oh my God!" It's like half the Gulf of Mexico is getting pounded. But in reality, it's that core area in the middle, which is really where everything is going on as far as wind is concerned, certainly, and maybe the rain extends out a bit further. But at the moment, it's very small. And I think, Joe, when you look at the global models and you look at the pressures that they've been showing with this thing, I mean, the GFS on the 6Z forecast for tonight, I think it has a 975 pressure. This thing is so small. I just wonder if the grids are just, the grid spacing inside the global models is just too big, too wide, and it's not picking up on this.
You might very well be right. I could remember a storm in 1975 in the Atlantic basin by the name of Gladys. And if you looked at the satellite pictures of Gladys, it looked like a cotton ball with a pin stuck through the middle. And that had winds of something like 150, 160 mile per hour. And you didn't really think initially when you looked at it that it was a hurricane, but it was a very small, condensed, tight storm. And that's exactly what we're looking at here with Milton. And Joe, you mentioned about the central pressure, 899 at last look, 899. And just to give you an idea, those of you who are not initiated into millibars in terms of atmospheric pressure, 899 would correspond on your aneroid barometer, and there's no aneroid barometer that has this. So forget about looking at it, the one that's hanging on the wall in your home or in your office. 899 millibars, 26.55 inches of mercury. That is about as far down. And as far as, you and I, we've often said we go back over 40 years. The only other storm, it has sustained winds of 180 miles an hour. And then off the top of my head, the only other storm that I could remember that had that strong a sustained wind base was Allen in the Gulf, also in the Gulf of Mexico, but that was in August. That was right in the midst of the real heating season. August of 1980, I believe that went to 180, or maybe it was even 185. That's the last time I could remember a storm that packed this much of a punch in terms of sustained winds. And over the span of the next 48 hours, this is not to say that this storm system, when it hits Florida, is going to be a Cat 5, because as it moves to the north and east toward the Florida Peninsula, it will encounter several things. It will encounter a more unfavorable atmospheric environment, and also slightly cooler Gulf waters, so that the storm will actually weaken a bit. It's also, over the next 24 hours, it will go through what we call the eye replacement cycle. So it's likely to diminish sometime in the foreseeable future. It's gonna have to diminish. It cannot, you say, oh my God, it's a Category 5, but these storms are like a spinning top. I mean, those of you who remember the good old days where if you had a top, a wooden top, you spun it, it went really fast, but it couldn't maintain that indefinitely. It has to start slowing down and wobbling. And this is what's going to happen with Milton over the next 24 to 48 hours. So it's not going to be a Cat 5 when it hits Florida, but it still is going to be a very potent 3 or 4 storm when it gets to Florida. And depending upon the topography of where this storm hits exactly relative to, let's say, the Tampa Bay, the St. Petersburg area, it is going to do some incredible damage. Joe, we speak of Helene. Helene did her worst damage, not to Florida, but to western North Carolina and portions of South Carolina and Georgia. But this storm is earmarked for Florida. This is going to be Florida's storm. It's going to cut right across Florida like a buzzsaw, and it is going to plunge millions of people into the dark. I hope and I pray, and I know that many of you who are watching me right now are hoping and praying too, that we do not see the same number of fatalities that we have seen with Helene. But this is a dangerous storm, and it is one that, again, in my memory, I cannot remember a storm of this magnitude posing such a threat to one single state as this particular storm is doing right now.
Well, a couple of things with respect to this when it approaches the coast. And Lindy on the chat board was asking about the storm surge, which is basically as the hurricane moves eastward, the ocean waters just essentially pile up on themselves. So you get this big wall of water, Gulf of Mexico water, that gets pushed eastward. And when it reaches the coast, well, guess what? It's got no place to go, so it surges inland, and it could be, you know, several feet. It could be many feet. It could be 12 feet. And in some cases, like going back with Helene, some of the storm surge was in the double digits. So my one concern I have uh, is, as far as that is concerned, is the fact that this comes only 10 days. This comes only less than 2 weeks since Helene made its landfall in the Florida Big Bend. Now, this is going to go. The center here is going to go. Let's say if it goes over Tampa. So if you're north and northwest of that along the Florida Big Bend, you're going to have an east wind, which is going to be offshore. So that's good. That'll be working against the water and pushing it out. But if you're south of the center, from Tampa south all the way down the coast to probably south of Fort Myers, maybe even down into the southwest corner of Florida, you're going to be dealing with southwest winds ahead of this, and that's going to be pushing water for every tide cycle as we get closer into the shore. And there's going to be some surge. I just wonder, Joe, in areas where the shore was compromised by Helene, where somebody that might have been in a spot that didn't flood with Helene might say, well, I didn't flood with Helene, so I may not flood with this, especially if it winds up weakening. Well, that may not be the case. If the infrastructure was damaged from Helene, it certainly hasn't been repaired in the last 10 days. You may not have flooded the last time, you might flood this time.
It is just the piling of the water, and it doesn't give a chance, Joe, each high tide cycle is roughly 12 hours apart. It just simply would not give a chance for the water to recede back during the low tide cycle. I mean, again, the water is just going to pile up and up and up and cause more and more damage. And you're absolutely right. Even in the Big Bend area, it's not a direct hit in the Big Bend area, but all of that water is going to be surging again forward ahead of Milton, and only exasperating the scenario that happened with Helene from a week or two ago. I saw on the ABC Evening News tonight one of the reporters standing in front of it is so funny how mental pictures go. When I initially saw this, what did I think of? I thought of wintertime and how they always send the reporter to the sanitation department where they have the gigantic pile of salt, which is many, many, many feet high. And they say this is what they're going to use to try to clear the roadways and melt the snow. Picture if you're in your mind, not a giant pile of salt, but a giant pile of debris caused by Helene. And this giant pile of debris is now sitting, I forget where the town was in Florida, the Big Bend area. This is the leftovers from Helene. And now they were talking about, some of this may become flying debris in a
Well, yeah,
couple of days.
you're gonna essentially have missiles flying around.
Exactly, exactly. This is Joe. It's
It, it's
mind-boggling.
it's it's a mind blowing setup. It really is. And look, this is also a situation. Certainly, you just hope that it doesn't, that it winds up being less bad. I mean, that's kind of, I guess, the best way to look at it. And you just keep your fingers crossed. But
And Frank R, thank you for. Sorry to interrupt, Joe, but Frank R on the chat board, I said in my memory that Allen was the only other storm that I could make comparisons to, at least in terms of wind. But Frank R has posted the type of top Atlantic hurricanes, and this goes in terms of atmospheric pressure. Allen exactly where Milton is right now at 899. Now he says Milton is 898.
oh, it
So
may
that
be. I eyeballed it. In fact, why don't I just bring up the recon chart because I have it here. This is the new plane that's in there, and it's made its first. Actually, now it's made two passes. The first pass, I just eyeballed it as like 897, 898. That's that red line that comes down into V on top of
right,
where it says October 7th, 2224Z. Now there's been a second pass. Okay, the second pass is on the far right of that first chart there, and it looks like it's a little bit higher. So we might have hit a peak at this point as far as the pressure intensity is concerned. I mean, there has to be an eye wall replacement cycle. And
right.
what that is for folks who don't know, so you get a storm that's in a deepening phase or an intensification phase, and the eye forms and the thunderstorms form around it. Well, eventually, that all the energy and the heat to form that gets used up, so it's got to replenish itself. So what'll happen is that the original eye will start to degrade, and then a new eye will form outside of it and eventually take over. While that happens, there's volatility in the pressure. It'll wind up. It'll start rising, and you could say, okay, it's weakening, which it sort of is, but depending on what you're dealing with, once the eye wall replacement cycle has been completed, it could start another round of intensification. So, it might go, say, from 898, which looks like it's the short-term bottom here, and maybe it climbs up to, I don't know, 920, 925, and it'll at some point when that replacement cycle is finished and the new Y is taking over, the pressure will stop going up and then may start going down again, assuming that the dynamics are still the same as far as the upper air conditions to favor strengthening. So, right now, again, we may have hit an initial peak here. I'll be interested to see what they go with on the advisory that should be coming out momentarily. By the way, the peak wind on the first pass, Joe, was just under 165 knots at flight level. This one on the second pass looks like it was a little bit lower And they may have been coming in. I don't know which. We have to kind of look at the graphic to see which, what direction they came in on. It looks like it's maybe a shade lower. Maybe it's like 160 or 155. But let me go back. I'm just going to bring up the graphical chart of this, if it lets me, because everybody and their mother is in tropicaltidbits.com. Okay, so the graphic usually lags. So this is mission 11. There's I said there's two of them in here. I'm sorry, mission 10. I want to go to mission. Let's go to mission 11. Let me switch it to mission 10. Okay, so here is mission 10. So the plane, if you see it here, there's a little plane icon. I don't know, you guys can't see my mouse, but there's a little plane icon. I'll just draw it. I'll put a circle around it. Okay, so it's flying up now toward the north. So the plane actually came in from the northeast, went in, fixed the center, came around, and now he's going this way. Okay, so his first plot there is 899. They haven't put the second plot yet. And if you look at the wind barbs, according to the scale here, um, right, right around the center, 137 knots or higher. I mean, that's just incredibly impressive. So, this is really like watching, a murder mystery, and you just watch all the clues evolve. I mean, that's how it's going to be here for through tomorrow, because it's not going to make landfall till late on Wednesday.
Yeah, it's in fact, yeah. Yesterday, if you remember from the Hurricane Center projection of the track of the storm, they had it. I said it was more or less moving over a 12-hour interval through the central part of Florida, from about Sarasota to the Space Coast, between noontime on Wednesday and midnight, Wednesday night to Thursday. And now, because obviously of the strengthening of the storm, the tremendous strengthening of the storm in the last 12 to 18 hours, the track now still basically the same, but the movement much slower, or at least the storm will not be arriving until late in the day on Wednesday along the Florida coastline. So a lot in just 12 hours or 18 hours, Joe, a lot has changed with this storm. And in terms of the strength, in terms of the intensity, in terms of the movement. Uh, and again, this is something, and I notice on the chat board, Paul Reed, in regard to your comment, Joe, about having trouble getting into tropical tidbits, he says too many people are accessing tropical tidbits ever since it was mentioned on Fox Weather Channel 2 weeks ago. So I guess some forecaster or meteorologist on Fox Weather Channel said, "Hey, you want to get some great maps, or you want to see the latest information? Go to tropicaltidbits.com or whatever." And apparently, as you just alluded to, a
And
lot of
as we just told them, to clog the server up even more. Levi's
yeah,
Tropical Tidbits gets very busy. He has a very big following to begin with, so that gave him a few new followers, I'm sure.
and we just got on the chat board also from our friend Johnny Quest, saying according to NOAA, pressure is now down to 897 millibars. Wow.
All right. Now, I brought this up last night. This is the Gulf sea surface temperature map, and you can see where the Yucatan Peninsula is. You can see where Florida is, and uh, Milton has been traversing water temperatures in excess of 30 degrees Celsius through all of this. Now, it's got that high 29 C, low 30 C water it's going to have it for a while. Okay. Then there is and by the way, these water temperatures, I'll just see, this is as of October 6th, so this is from yesterday. Um, then there's a little bit of well, let's call it a coolish pocket, but I mean, it's still warm water. It's 29.7. So that's warm enough to sustain a Cat 5. Then the water temperatures jump up again in this narrow band. we have an ever shrinking. Then we got the band left from Helene, and that's this darker green here that you see, where this area where the water temperature is less than 29 Celsius, in right in there inside the line that you see, the what's the line?
Isotherm?
The isotherm. Uh, that's a little bit less. So it's going to this is where you're probably going to see a weakening, but 2829C is certainly enough to support a Cat 4. So it's going to have to traverse that. And then you'll notice that right near the Gulf, the shelf water along the west coast of Florida is exceptionally warm. You're talking 30 C water from just off of Tampa, all the way down south into southern Florida. So it does get back into this warm shelf here before it makes landfall. So it won't be spending a lot of time there because it's going to be moving at a fairly solid clip at this point. But at least from the standpoint of water temperatures, there is a limiting factor to the east of it that it has to deal with. So we have that. The other issue is uh, the shear, and I want to bring up the West Atlantic since I preloaded everything. Up there it goes, bad gateway. We shouldn't have said tropical tidbits, Joe. This, this is how I can't get in. I had something and I can't get in. All right, it's going to try to load it for me in the meantime. I'm going to try to pull up the wind shear map. But in the meantime, we can go on to a few other things. Just to give it a bit of perspective with respect to the U.S. satellite loop, the rain that's been over Florida is part of an old frontal low on a frontal boundary that's running out to the east. Now, this is a bit of a problem because it's been raining there for basically the last 2.5 days. So everything is saturated to begin with. So this is going to probably create some potential flash flooding issues when the rains from the hurricane come. Much like what happened to an extent, the same thing happened in western North and South Carolina, northwestern North Carolina, northwestern South Carolina, where we had a frontal boundary come through, and that dumped 3, 4, 5 inches of rain to begin with, and then you had the hurricane rains that fell on top of it. All right, so let's see if I can pull this off. So here's the now. The global models I mentioned earlier are having a lot of trouble with because this storm is so darn small. The GFS at, right now, the forecast on the 18Z model run and the first map here is the 8 o'clock tonight forecast has a pressure of 977. Joe, 977. We know
Right.
that's obviously
Obviously.
it's obviously off by 79 millibars.
Yes.
And but I think it's got the general idea with the track. It's the fact that it's small probably limits the interaction with the Yucatan Peninsula, and then it's going to turn up to the north, more northeast, as we move through the day tomorrow and into tomorrow night, and you can start to see that it does get bigger. Okay, so as it gets bigger, the gales will spread out. The strongest winds will still be confined near the core, but they just probably won't be as strong. And even the GFS takes it down into the 950s, and it seems to be eyeballing Tampa Bay for the last 4 or 5 runs. It hasn't really varied hardly any as far as that goes. So the tracks remain the same here. Uh, we Again, this is not a threat for the Mid Atlantic. It's not a threat for the Northeast. It's not a threat for the Western Carolinas. The coastal Georgia and coastal South Carolina might get skipped with some rain.
Not changing.
Excuse me? What?
I know what she said. My fault. Sorry about that. There you go. I forgot to switch. All right. So no biggie. But here we go. Now you got the map up there. Let me get rid of the sea surface temperature map so I don't get confused. Um,
Well,
okay.
the reason why I didn't see it is I was trying to get myself onto Tropical Tidbits and looking for another weather site other than Tropical Tidbits to take a look, and but you're in it now, so
You
that's
know,
good.
you can see it runs up to the northeast. Now, I'm going to try to get the wind shear map, uh, and let's see what happens. We may have
Paul
to.
Reed is asking. Paul Reed is asking, by the way, who is that woman in the background? Obviously, he, and then he's saying, Maggie, was that you? I don't. The other woman in the background was a strange voice, which I've been hearing, and I've been trying to identify for the last 40 years. I think I'm married to her though,
You
but
think?
she's the executive producer, as Joe and I call her, of our show, and she's watching upstairs. So thank you, Renata.
All right. While the maps are loading on tropical tidbits, the 8 o'clock advisory: 21.9 north, 90.4 west. Maximum sustained winds are 180 miles an hour. That's what they're carrying on the advisory. Now starting to move a little bit, moving east at 10. That's an interesting development.
Yes.
And as far as location, it is 650 miles southwest of Tampa. Okay, and they carry on the advisory 897, as you said earlier, 26.49 inches. 26.49 inches. It's sort of hard to get your head around that. Uh, but and Wilm, just for context, I think Wilm is the record at 882 in the Atlantic Basin. Patricia in the Eastern Pacific, I don't remember how many years ago that was. That got down to 870. And I think that was the only time I've ever seen on an advisory in this in either the Atlantic Basin or the East Pacific Basin where they were carrying maximum sustained wind. I think at one the highest that when they had was 205 miles an hour. Never seen anything quite like that. But there's your forecast. The Hurricane Center. They nudge it a little north on one run, nudge it a little south on another. There hasn't been any really significant change in the overall forecast. We do have all sorts of hurricane warnings out. For Florida, we've got from Bonita Beach northward to the mouth of the Swanee River, Joe, including, where Ed Norton resides, including Tampa Bay. We have storm surge warnings up for the west coast of Florida from Flamingo Beach northward to the Swanee River. And that includes Charlotte Harbor and Tampa Bay. A watch from Sebastian Inlet to Edisto Beach, and that includes the St. Johns River. We have watches up for the dry Tortugas, for Lake Okeechobee, for the Florida West Coast from Uncle Coco Lowski to south of. Please put down towns you could pronounce. I can pronounce to south of Bonita Beach, and on the East Coast we have a hurricane watch from St. Lucie and the Indian River County line northward to the mouth of the St. Mary's River. So that goes all the way up to the Georgia border. And we've got tropical storm warnings for Flamingo to Bonito Beach, the Florida West Coast from the mouth of the Swanee River to Indian Pass, tropical storm watches for the east coast of Florida, south of St. Lucie, Indian River County line, southward to Flamingo. Also for the coast of Georgia and South Carolina, from north of the mouth of the St. Mary's River to the mouth of the Santee River in South Carolina. So we got a lot of geography here that is covered by all sorts of watches and warnings, and that doesn't include the flash flood watches that are up, and of course we're going to have severe weather issues to deal with. So, all right, here's the shear that everybody's been referencing. There's if you look careful, all that red that you see in the Northeast Gulf and also south of Louisiana, that's 50 knots of shear. That's the average from say 5,000 feet up to about 30,000 feet. And in the meantime, it is sitting outside of that zone clearly. And then you'll see that low center moves northeastward, and just as it's beginning to approach the coast, it starts to get on the southern edge of that shear zone. So you're counting on that shear to get in there and do its job of weakening this to an extent, but it's only going to be able to weaken it so far. It's not as if the shear is suddenly digging down, that you've got a deep trough in the upper atmosphere that's digging down and spreading shear all the way down to, say, Cuba. This is going to get into that shear zone it may be in the last 6 to 8 hours, 6 to 12 hours of its life, and that'll bring the pressure up. But at the same time, when it gets into that shear zone, the storm itself is going to grow in size as the wind field spreads out, as the rain field spreads out, and so on.
Yeah. Well, we'll send just just re loading my my page here because I wanted to see we're up to 99 likes and we have had well 276 people. Now we hit 100. We just hit 100. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you. By the way,
Thank you.
welcome to everybody on the chat board tonight. It's great to see everybody here, the regulars and a few others. Welcome to you. Welcome to those of you who are watching in the background. We're here Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. And Fridays and Saturdays are usually off days for us. If you like the show, hit the like button, and you have. Thank you, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. Turn your notifications on so you don't miss us. All right, let's go through a few other things here as we roll along. So here's WPC's rainfall forecast for the next 7 days. So obviously, this is all what's going on now over Florida. We've got 7 to 10 inch bands in northeast Florida, and that's because the rain is going to get enhanced with the east wind that'll be coming in from off the ocean as the low. It looks like the center of this is going to ride right along the I-4 corridor, which is going to take it over Orlando before it goes out on the other side. Also, it's a general 7 to 10 inch rain in that dark brown, 5 to 7 inches of additional rain in much of central and north Florida. But again, this could wind up locally. You could, because if the convection is involved, you certainly could wind up with local areas getting double that amount. A little bit less in South Florida, south of the center. So here's where we start to deal with the potential for some severe thunderstorms to develop and for tornadoes. The Storm Prediction Center is indicating first for tomorrow, we have a marginal risk, probably more tomorrow night than during the day, of marginal risk for severe weather, isolated severe thunderstorms, and a 2% tornado risk. The day 3 forecast is for a fairly large area of slight risk for central and south Florida, a marginal risk as you go further north. Then it sort of cuts off near the Georgia state line for general thunderstorm activity. We don't have the tornado forecast until tomorrow, but I suspect that we're going to have a zone of 2 to 5. And I wouldn't be surprised if on Wednesday, Joe, they put a 10% area in there somewhere.
I would not be, right now, this is, I would say, a conservative forecast for Wednesday. It's interesting also to see, Joe, how the Big Bend area, the Panhandle area on Wednesday is totally out of any kind of thunderstorm projection. In fact, you look at the United States as a whole, I mean, the rest of the country is enjoying a spell of very tranquil, very quiet, very lovely weather. It's only the folks who live in the Florida Peninsula, the central and southern areas of the peninsula that are going to be facing, all this mayhem over the course of the next 24 to 48 hours.
The hurricane tracking models, which will probably update in about 45 minutes, been remarkably consistent. There's the 18Z forecast, and I'll try to make this a little bit bigger so we can, you can see it better. But look, I mean, how very, very tightly clustered here. The southernmost and the southernmost model looks like it's goes into Charlotte Harbor. The northernmost model looks like it's just north of Tampa St. Pete. So, I mean, we really kind of got this narrowed down. And for the most part, the hurricane tracking models have been doing pretty well with this particular storm. And then you notice it's a sharp right turn to the east, passing south of Bermuda. Most of the models taking it south of Bermuda and continuing it east across the Atlantic. And the intensity models, now, of course, all of them have it as a Cat 5. They were just a few of them that had it as a Cat 5 yesterday. All of them obviously now as a Cat 5, so you're going to start off as a Cat 5. I was trying to figure out here, at least based on the intensity models, how this will play out And just looking at over time, I'm going to bring the bottom so you can see the bottom scale here gives you hours going out. So this was at 1 o'clock this afternoon. So 48 hours would be 1 o'clock on Wednesday. So if we look at those points there, there are there's four models, Joe, that still have it as a category 5 at Wednesday at 1 o'clock. And that's where it's not at not too far away from the Florida coastline. Uh, there are the vast majority of the models, though, are either in the Cat 4 zone or the Cat 3 zone. I said yesterday that I think that this would go inland as, a strong Cat 3, low end Cat 4, high Cat 3, low end Cat 4, and I'm going to stand by that. That's my guess here. A lot is going to depend on the shear and how it gets involved. And what happens when the storm moves over that cool, cooler, slightly cooler pool of water that was left in the wake of Helene.
I would agree 100% with you. And as I said yesterday, and I'll say it again, once you get up to a Cat 3 or higher, or a Cat 4 or Cat 5, I mean, there's going to be tremendous damage. There's going to be tremendous devastation. Um, it's shades of differences. My goodness, and again, coming so right on the heels of another devastating storm. I mean, how much more can Florida take? It really is sad, and it just there's no words, Joe. There's just absolutely no
No,
words.
there really isn't. I mean, this is two majors in less than 2 weeks. Doesn't happen often. Uh, has happened before. It's a storm that's crossing the Gulf of Mexico from west to east. Uh, doesn't happen often, but when we get into the late season months, like when we get into the latter this time of year, you get into October and November when those upper air westerlies from Canada start to descend further south, motion to the from west to east in the Gulf of Mexico with tropical cyclones is more common. Apparently, I saw a few posts today that this must be a manufactured storm because storms don't move from west to east in the Gulf of hurricanes don't move from west to east. They do, and you're a moron. Um, and not necessarily in that order, by the way. I'm trying to get this to update because I wanted to get that one of the mesoscale models. Okay, folks, just a note to anybody that's on Tropical Tidbits, not that's watching the show, but just if the word gets out there, the Joe and Joe Weather Show podcast would like to access these maps. So can you please get off the server so we can, get on because we sort of have priority here. All right, I'll see if I can get it to load on its own, and separately, and then come back when the map does load. I just have to keep refreshing. Uh, while we're waiting for that, we can. I know you mentioned to me that you have several things to say. Before you do that, I'm going to say I got a Bill Goodman message. Oh, Bill Goodman just sent me a message because I sent him a message about an hour ago that says looks like it's down to 897, and his response was yikes. So there.
Okay.
I thought maybe he had something more uh, more important to let me know about, but apparently he's just too stunned by the 897.
All right. Well, I did want to say something, and I've been, curly in efforts to not say this because we have said for almost from the beginning that we try to keep politics out of this, out of our discussion. But Patrick Henry perhaps said it best. He said, "United we stand, divided we fall." And Joe, this what we've seen with Helene and what we're about to see with this potential devastating storm Milton is such that we all have to come together. And as I said earlier, I was watching the ABC Evening News with David Muir, and they've had reporters all over Florida covering this. And the one thing that you heard is the morale of the people from FEMA who have it is very, very low there because of what one particular individual has been saying about FEMA, claiming that they are out of money, claiming that all the money has gone to some other particular place. Um, and you shake your, I shook my head. I can't believe that, somebody in such a high position, in terms of politics, use that word, is saying things like that. And we see the people working there, what's off. I mentioned yesterday how, especially in North Carolina, it's hard enough to get to many of these homes, even during bright sunny days, because they're located up in the mountains, and now they're suddenly cut off from everything, the mud and the power outages and everything else. And the fact that, to say that there's no money and that they're not giving their all for this is just absolutely the Vice President Harris said it was an irresponsible statement. I will go one further than that, say that statement or these statements were despicable, absolutely despicable. That is my point of view. It's not Joe's point of view. I know some of you are saying, "Oh, look at this." I don't care if you're Republican, Democratic, Independent. We should all be pulling together now as best we can in the wake of a major disaster last week and an incoming disaster this week. We don't need to politicize these weather events. And the other thing that blew my mind, Joe, is that the governor of the state in the crosshairs right now, the governor of that state has refused to take phone calls from the President of the United States and the Vice President of the United States in light of the disaster last week and in light of the oncoming disaster that's coming their way. I remember, Joe, in 2012, in the wake of Sandy, then President Obama went to New Jersey, and the governor, a Republican governor, Chris Christie, met President Obama and actually shook his hand and gave him a hug to thank him for coming and thank him for whatever help, both monetarily and also in terms of spiritually, to give. I mean, that is what you ought to do in a situation like this. You don't you don't arbitrarily just say, no, I'm not taking a phone call from him or her. No, the situation is such that, oh, they're out of money. This FEMA, they can't help. They're not doing well. They're not doing as you know they're falling behind or whatever. You know, like I said, Patrick Henry was absolutely right. United we stand, but if you keep up with this kind of talk, divided we're most definitely going to fall. And that's all I have to say about that. I'm sorry to break our rules, but this is not something that you should just say. Oh,
Let me just add to this because last night I was hacked off for a whole host of reasons. Okay, you want to argue about see, and this is the thing for me. Um, you want to have a not you personally, Joe. I'm just saying in general. Um, there you want to have a conversation regarding policy. I think we should be all adult enough to be able to sit down and say, okay, this is what I think about this policy or that policy. You might disagree or agree with it, but it needs to be done in a civilized way. Well, like, thanks to Facebook and Twitter and a whole long list of social media platforms, you can't do that anymore. So what happens is that uh, whichever side you're on politically, you are going to believe the worst of everything that, so as long as that supports your position, okay, and the same goes to the other side. So what happens? You've got foreign actors, you've got foreign, these foreign these nations that are enemies of this country. They're in there in social media with fake accounts, and they're posting all this stuff that If it supports your politics or goes against your politics, you're going to read it and you're going to get inflamed one way or the other. And it's really sad because people's lives are in danger with with storms like this. This is serious. This is serious stuff that we're dealing with here. Okay. And you not only have to deal with it, but now you got to fight off the people who think that all of this is fake, all of this is manufactured, nothing is real anymore. Okay.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, this is a time where you got to set all that stuff aside and look, I'm sure that there are probably some issues that FEMA has to deal with. Western North Carolina is not the most easily accessible place in the country to get to. There are no interstates, so the one interstate that went through there has been washed away. Actually, two interstates that have gone through there have been washed away. So it's just hacking me off because I'm seeing people who are sitting on their rear ends behind some keyboard who have not lifted a single finger or have not sent a single dollar to some entity to go help these people or even an article of clothing. I got to tell you, this town I live in here in North Georgia, it's amazing. The stores were all raided and out of food and all sorts of supplies here. Why? Because people here bought all the stuff up and then through their local churches, they formed convoys and they have moved that stuff all up into North Carolina. As far as I know, not a single one of them is reported back, at least that I've seen on social media in the local Facebook groups, where they've had a problem where the stuff's been confiscated, that they've had run-ins with FEMA, that FEMA's preventing them from delivering the supplies. Not a single one. Okay, but you're home on your rear end and you're sitting there and you're reading it, and of course you're going to believe it because it helps whoever it is your candidate is. And I'm sick and honestly, I'm just so sick and tired because you and I are trying to do a responsible job. The people at FEMA are trying to do a responsible job. The National Guard is up there trying to do a responsible job. And you've got these, vile, I think they're vile human beings that read this stuff and spread it and spread lies. No, I saw where people were spreading a post. I don't know if I mentioned this last night. They mentioned a post that the people in Western North Carolina, that the federal government has confiscated all their land, okay, and not letting the people back because they're going to use that land to mine for lithium to make EV batteries. I mean,
Right.
come on, seriously? I mean, think about this. Does anybody that reads that do they think? Do they read it and do they think and say, you know what? That just sounds preposterous. That just sounds ridiculous. And it's all designed to piss people off. Oh, I used the P word.
Well,
And
yeah.
I'm just
So,
I'm really aggravated. And then I gotta read the weather conspiracy people who really they somehow
yeah, yeah.
the old Abbott and Costello joke, Joe. Did you go to school stupid? Yeah, and I came out the same way. That's
Exactly.
exactly what
Exactly.
this is. And I find it ironic. I find this the irony of to me is I'm pretty sure that this is the case across the board. The same people who say that the government is creating these storms and manufacturing these storms and steering them because they never tell you for what end that the government can do that. Okay, but if you turn the argument around and you say, well, then what about man-made man-induced climate change? Oh no, there's no climate change. Okay, it's all natural. It's a cycle. Man is not doing anything. Do you realize how stupid that when someone uses that argument, I forgot who was that said that it
Yeah,
takes a really intelligent person to know that they've said something stupid.
the same politician, Joe, that you're referring to or making allusion to about they, whoever they are controlling the weather. they are the ones responsible for Helene and for this impending hurricane. That same stupidity, that same person said back in April when we had the almost Richter 5 earthquake here in New York City. And a few days later, the total eclipse of the sun, she said, it's the Almighty. The Almighty is causing all this. It's a sign from above. Repent or whatever. Well, I had known since I was like 10 years old about that eclipse in 2020, this year, 2024, had been looking forward to it. It had been predicted. It was a play whose script was written eons in the past. We knew about the alignment of the sun and the moon. So it wasn't something that just happened, as she was alluding to. And the earthquake, I had done a story on News 12 with one of the people from the Lamont Doherty Earth Laboratory who said, this was like 15 years ago, he said, we're due for a significant earthquake in the New York area, close to a Richter 5 or 5.5, and we got it. So both of these events were predictable. Both of these events we knew were coming in one way, shape, or form. They didn't just happen. They weren't a sign from above that repent or whatever else. And now we're being told by this same person that somebody, whoever the hell they is the ones who are creating these storms. And they going so far out. And I was happy to see that people on both sides of the aisle went after her for that statement. It was a stupid statement among all the other stupidities that she's done over the years. And Carl Semkow, you say, if you don't think it should be politicized, why are you doing just that? Yesterday, I said on this, and you can go back and look at yesterday's show, I said, trying to help these people in places like the mountains of Western North Carolina is difficult, if well nigh impossible, because of what has happened in the wake of Helene. And today, when I have to sit down at dinner time, watch an evening newscast and see these poor people from FEMA whose morale has gone down, God knows how far down, upon hearing about what the former administration is saying about them, saying they're not doing a good job, they don't have any money, all the money went to migrants and everything else. I mean, how do you feel if you're trying your best to try to help these people? That finally it just crossed the line with me, and I got very, very upset with that. I got upset about the fact that the governor of Florida doesn't want to talk to the president of the United States in the wake of last week's tragedy, in the wake of the impending tragedy coming. I mean, what? It's mind-boggling, Joe, and I apologize. I apologize.
No, don't apologize. No, listen, I've been feeling frustrated. Believe me, I've been feeling frustrated all day long. I seldom go on Twitter. I happened to go on today because I wanted. I put a couple of I put links to the show and I put links to my website stuff. I just wanted to make sure. I've been doing so much of that today. I forgot to send you the link to the show tonight. So I wanted to check back and make sure I did. And of course, when I did that, I was stumbled upon a bunch of other people's what they were posting, and it's like as I'm reading each post one after another after another. I mean, you had this one guy. He had it all. Apparently, he had the whole government conspiracy figured out as far as Milton is concerned and how they were going to weaken it and strengthen it. And it's not really a Category 5 hurricane. It's all fake, or it is. It was so convoluted. I was just like, what is this? But it's just that whole mindset, and it just gets you angry because you're trying to do your job. You're trying to give the best. I mean, I've had friends of mine here that have family in Florida, and they're reaching out to me wanting to know, because they've got decisions that they got to make, and I'm trying to do the best that I can to give them the correct information. And I'm surrounded by, all this stuff on online that just, it makes you feel like crap about doing your job. And I don't, and I hate that feeling. I'm very proud of what I do. I have been doing this, add us both together. We've got like 90 years of experience here. Okay.
Yeah,
And it's
I just want to.
and it's mind boggling.
I appreciate all of what you've said, and I appreciate the many of the comments on the chat board. I'm just going to say one more thing, and I'm going to shut this all down, this whole conversation. But I mentioned the Chris Christie Obama thing. I was at News 12 in 2012, and a bunch of us were watching in the control room this live feed of Obama meeting with Chris Christie and Christie like shaking his hand and giving him a hug or whatever and thanking him. And somebody in the control room, one of my colleagues who was a Democrat and was a big supporter of Obama and everything, turned to me and he says, look at that, Joe. You know, now he decides that he's going to, you know, be on Obama's side. In other words, Christie or whatever like that. And I must have shocked him. I said, and you know why? Because that's what he's supposed to do. At this point in
Right.
time, in a disaster like this, everything goes to one side. You're Democratic, Republican, you're Americans now, for God's sake. And they're trying to help each other. They're trying to help the state of New Jersey, which just went through a tremendous amount of damage from Sandy. I said, I don't give a blankety blank whether or not it's Christie with Obama or Republican or Democrat. This is what you're supposed to do. And here we have a major storm that hit last week in Florida. We have another one that's taking aim at Florida in a couple of days. And we don't need to have politics thrown into this. We need to work with each other. And if you don't, and if you're the governor, for God's sake, of the state of Florida that's about to get hit, and you're not taking a phone call from the president of the United States, who probably is asking, what can we do for you? How can we help you? Whatever like that. What can we help you with from last week? If you don't want to take that phone call, I'm going to stop right here before I say something, before we get thrown off of YouTube, Joe. Anyway, that's my ire is up. I'm sorry. I apologize to everybody, but it's
Darlene Johnson on the chat board. Before I answer your respond to what you say, I would just like some context here. I don't know if you're responding to somebody else, but you're writing fear mongering. I love this. I always fear mongering to get better YouTube ratings. Are you directing that at us, or is that an answer
you
to?
think we're doing this? You think
Wait, no,
I'm
no,
doing
no,
this
wait, wait,
to get
wait, wait,
better
wait, wait,
YouTube
Joe,
ratings?
wait, wait,
All
wait.
right.
Want to get the context here. And she answering, I can't see the whole conversation because it's one, line after another. So is she responding to somebody else where they're talking about it in theory, or is she, saying that that's what we're doing? So if you would be okay, so she says no, that's not what we're doing. Okay, I understand. That's why I asked the context before we, we went off the deep end. Okay, just I appreciate that. She's speaking generally. I get it. All right, no problem. I just wanted to see. That's why I asked, because otherwise I didn't want to start yelling at a viewer when she didn't need to be yelled at, or he, whatever whoever it is I'm referring to. So no, she's not talking about us. Um, and by the way, just for the record, we can fearmonger all we want. It doesn't work. So, I mean, it's not like we do that, but I mean, if we did do it, it would probably not get us a single additional viewer anyway. So, so there's that. We do have a new recon, Joe. New recon. So I think what's happening now is that we do have this eye wall replacement cycle. So 897 appears to be the bottom. The last pass, 904. 904. Now, I've been trying to get, they're all, I tried to go on Pivotal, but they don't have all the on Pivotal weather to get the maps, and I could get in there, but they don't have the, all the hurricane mesoscale models that Tropical Tidbits has. And unfortunately, Tropical Tidbits' server is stuck. I'm stuck on the storm page here for Hurricane Milton. So there's really nothing new here I can show you. In fact, oh, here we go. Oh, something just came up. Oh, wonderful. All right, that's the GFS. I don't want the GFS. I want the HMON. Trying to get the HMON model. Oh, good. Oh, sorry, they're moving again. Yay. Okay, so here's the HMON, Joe. So the HMON, which, since we're talking about a storm that's really, really small in size in general, not talking about its strength, just talking about its, you know, how wide it is. The HMON is, usually likes to go off the deep end. And as far as the pressures are concerned, it loves to make Category 5 hurricanes all the time. But it's been pretty decent with this. Now, it actually is too deep. It went down to 882 at 5 o'clock this afternoon on the HBOM model. Then it's got 889, 889, 892, 900, 902, 906, 910. By tomorrow morning, 2 a.m., it's 9:15. So you get the idea. Maybe focus less on the number and more on the fact that we're, some sort of eye wall replacement cycle. Then 9:22, 9:27 rises up by Wednesday night. It's at 9:44, and if you look on the upper right, you can see the Florida coast there. 53 and 960. It gets it up to a 960 by the time it reaches land. So I'll stand by what I said before, and that by the time by the time this makes landfall, it'll probably be a Cat 3, maybe a high end 3, low end Cat 4. I think that works for me anyway.
Well, unfortunately, that still means that there's going to be a lot of problems. It's going to be another. Unfortunately, we're going to be seeing on the national news come Thursday and Friday, and probably beyond, more damage, more devastation, and sorry to say, more fatalities. That I won't, make a comment, but there are people, and we've seen it in the past, Joe. Well, I've seen storms before. I've seen hurricanes. I'm going to sit here in my house now, and sadly, that's probably going to lead to some very tragic stories before the end of this week. So let's just hope and pray. Let's hope that they in Florida are preparing for the worst and hope for the best.
Carl Semkow, I'm going to take issue with what you said. He needs to saying to Joe Rayo that he needs to calm down and stick to the facts regarding the weather. Okay. Um, I don't know if you realize this, but and this may come as a huge shock to you, but Joe's a taxpayer. Isn't that right, Joe Rayo? You're a taxpayer, correct?
Well, the last I looked.
Yes, I'm a taxpayer. Okay.
Yes.
Everybody here is a taxpayer. So we all do have opinions and about things. Just you're I'm going to assume you're a taxpayer too. So um, we're entitled to those opinions, and since this is our show, we can pretty much do what we want. So I'll leave it at that. If that's a problem for you, then you can go elsewhere and that whatever whatever your weather someplace else. Uh, but
Now we've been doing this show now for about 5 years, Joe.
5 years in December, I think will be. Plus, we did it
All right.
before that, but yeah,
All right.
it's just
And we're,
been
we're
the.
on and we're on 5 days a week. So let's say 70% out of the typical week, we're on 70% of the time out of the 7 days. So we've been on approximately, and you may actually have the actual number. I'm
I
not.
think I think we've done like 1,300 something shows.
I've got here 1,277. All
Yeah,
right.
that sounds about right.
I, and out of those, let's say if we rounded off to 1,300, how many times have I gone off on a political rant on this show? Once,
I probably could count it on
twice.
one. I'll probably say just to cover ourselves. I'll probably say maybe 4 or 5 times. I mean,
Okay.
rarely do this. I mean,
I'm gonna.
this was a rare thing that we have done.
That means that we have gone on a political rant on this show 0.0030% of the time out of 1,300 shows. So we have always said that we try to stick to weather, which we've pretty much done, and that we try to keep politics out of the
Right.
equation. And we have done that, except that today, when I see a situation like what we had last week and what we were going to have, and I see what apparently is some sort of political statement or politics getting into it, I had to say something, and
So
that's what I.
yeah,
Hopefully, I'll take another 1,300 shows before I blow off again on this. But that's the way.
David Delgado, you put it perfectly. Thank you. You would put it absolutely perfectly. David Delgado on the chat board. You aren't talking politics. You're asking people to be sensible and be non-political. And that's what really we're doing. Protecting life and property isn't political, it's humane. That's exactly correct. Our objection is to the fact that we're in this is a dangerous situation. Lives are at stake. We need to be able to put these things aside and do what we need to do to make sure that everybody gets through this. And that's the goal of what we've been speaking about. Both we spoke about some of this yesterday and some of this, today. And someone else asked, I'm sorry, I don't, the board's moving so quickly, which is a good thing because that means you guys are all talking. Um, how do you filter all this stuff out? The thing is, I filter it out by trying to stay off as much as possible, but sometimes you just can't help it. It's like, I got to go on Facebook to put links up to what we're doing on a given day. So I'm gonna wind up seeing something, and sure, more often than not, I'll see a post and suddenly, I start scrolling and I'll see that there are more. It's more than just an isolated incident, and then I start seeing that the stuff that's on there that's being put on there is all lies and all crap, and it just and it gets to you. It just really it's hard, and unfortunately, everybody's getting victimized this way, and it gets you angry. So that's why one of the things I've done as far as Facebook is concerned. I mean, I do post on Facebook on my weather page there, but I have reduced it to a minimum. Okay, they get my morning website post. You get my links to whatever videos I put up, and that's it. Um, you know, I don't even respond to people that if they ask me weather questions. If you want to ask me a weather question, you can come on the watch the YouTube show and do it there. You could go on my subscription weather website where I do all sorts of extra weather. If you message me there, I'll answer you right back. We could have a long conversation. Chuck Cardillo and I talk every day on my Patreon platform, and that's it. I just will not get. I just don't want to get involved. I don't do the social media things that a good business person is supposed to do because I don't want the emotional and the mental stress that goes with it. And I don't go on Twitter because everybody on Twitter is just completely off the wall. I mean, they're all out of their minds on Twitter. Uh, so there's that. Uh, well, I don't have anything else to do because I think we covered all the weather. Let me just really quickly check just in case the zero Z models are out. They probably aren't, but I'm just going to check real quick. Nope, still 18Z. So I think we'll just kind of leave it at that, and we'll both take a deep breath. I'm going to go smoke a cigar, I think, before bedtime.
And we have a very special along with all of this. I mentioned last night the Comet, and the Comet now is really developing very nicely. And one of the things that's going to be interesting, Joe, I think, is going to be Saturday night, because the way this comet is moving relative to the position of the sun in the sky, it is suddenly just going to appear in our western sky after sunset beginning this weekend. And people who, have been driving along, in the evening, looking up at the sky and just, not seeing anything, all of a sudden on Saturday and Sunday, they're going to see this big star with a long tail. Where the hell did that come from? And that's a new comet, which is going to, I think, get a lot of attention. The hurricane right now is getting all the attention, but after the hurricane passes, I think we'll be directing our attention to this very rare and also very beautiful astronomical sight in a year where we have seen a total eclipse of the sun, a spectacular display of aurora borealis, northern lights. Now we're going to top it off with a beautiful comet, which will be visible in our skies beginning this weekend. We'll get more into that later on this week.
Real quick, Joe, Paul Reed wants to know, do you need binoculars?
No, this comet is very bright. In fact, hasten to say, on Wednesday, there's a chance that it might get so bright it will be visible even during the daytime. But it's going to be right next to the sun, and we don't want to tell people to look for it unless you know exactly how to do it, because the blinding light of the sun could lead to if you're not careful, could lead to blindness. You don't want to look directly at the sun while you're trying to find the comet, but it's going to be that bright. So by the time we get to the weekend, it should be very obvious without binoculars. This bright star and a tail. So that's what makes this a very special sky event. This will be the brightest comet we've had going back to Hale Bopp. And some of you may remember Hale Bopp. That was 27 years ago. So finally, after more than a quarter of a century, we're going to get another chance to see a beautiful comet in our sky this weekend. And again, we'll talk more about that later after we get all this mayhem about the hurricane past us, hopefully, during this week.
Miss Blue Ocean, you got the smile, okay? She wanted to get a smile out of me, so I saw that, and you got the smile. You know, thank you. You get into these moods sometimes, and it just you forget that you need to be happy. Super chat hits tonight. Thank you, Trish S. Most appreciated, Brandon Doherty, Ms. Blue Ocean, Chuck Cardillo, my pal. Thank you for hitting super chat tonight. And Joe and I will be back tomorrow night, hopefully in a calmer state, at the usual time, which is Mr. Rayo.
7:35 p.m.
All right, so we'll see everybody tomorrow night. Night, night.
Good night, folks.